in! Stop! Stop! Let me in! Let me in! Stop! Stop!
Please support this channel by subscribing and leaving comments.
Chilcut's really going to want to see this.
There was enough there to establish a definite track, where we could follow it. We just didn't.
Sightings that people called into the police department, and I'd go out and try to identify the tracks and follow the tracks.
Dark-colored creature crossed the road in front of him.
Probably a dozen or so people that saw Tsiatko.
There's more than enough evidence there to determine or to indicate that something does exist.
It looked at me, it took 2 steps, and was gone.
You could hear it breathing in the woods.
I think this mystery could be solved with this kind of technology.
When I first saw this, I didn't tell anybody about this for a long time because I was scared somebody was going to make fun of me.
And I would think you would get a lot heavier track in the front.
I can't say whether it was a man or not a man. I think that some of the local authorities probably know more than they like to talk about.
No doubt in my mind what I saw. He's out there.
About 13-foot, 14-foot trees just started to shake, and an awful sound, something between a cougar screaming and a bear growling.
I played a few more notes on my flute, and it responded. It answered back. It grunted back at me.
Western Washington State is home to America's only rainforest. Dark, lush, and jungle-like.
The rainforest is just a beautiful place.
According to the local Salish Indian tribe, this forest is a home to large, hairy, man-like creatures. Legendary giants that have wandered this coastal range for centuries.
Yes, after seeing it that day, me and my brother both talked about it, and no more was it just a story.
But the local Indians are not the only people to have reportedly seen these creatures.
There were tracks all over the place.
I used to not be a believer at all. I thought it was all a big hoax.
You know, it had a really, really long stride.
That I'm very open-minded about it at this point, perhaps more a believer than not.
We'd take steps, it would take steps. When we would stop, it would stop, stop, stop.
The Encounters team has come to Grays Harbor County, Washington in an attempt to discover the truth behind the legends of these hairy forest giants. Creatures local Native Americans call the Tsiatko giants.
But that day it changed my whole view about the creature.
Cryptozoologist by profession and driven by her own mysterious encounter, Autumn Williams travels the world.
Thousands of people can't have seen something that doesn't exist. All we need is proof.
Sometimes at dawn, or the edge of dusk, there's a fleeting glimpse of an impossible sight.
Do you have it?
Get it. I see it.
Michael!
What's the range?
The sightings are real. The technology, cutting edge. Are you ready for mysterious encounters?
Native American tribes all across the United States recount legends of large, hairy wild men who live in the woods. Each tribe has a different word for these creatures in their native tongue. Sasquatch, Zonaqua, Bukwas, Tsiatko. The Encounters team and I are here to learn if these legendary creatures are the same ones modern-day eyewitnesses still claim to see, and if they truly exist.
Autumn Williams is a cryptozoologist and field researcher, a specialist in the search for as yet undiscovered species.
Local Native Americans have carved these creatures into sacred totems for hundreds of years. They are shown right along with ordinary animals of the forest, like the bear and the raven.
Reindeers, check.
The Tsiatko were known creatures to the Native Americans, and the description is eerily similar to those of eyewitnesses today.
Kind of a tall creature.
You know, taller than what an average man would be.
And it was black in color.
Grayish type hair.
It's all brown from head to toe.
There was a highlight of tan around the edges.
You know, his arms swung when he walked.
3 or 4 steps across the roadway.
The second, he was in the timber.
These amazing stories when Mysterious Encounters returns.
We're kind of using the methods to film wildlife on this animal and hoping that it has some of the same parameters.
The Quinault Indian Reservation is located on the Olympic Peninsula in western Washington state, about 200 miles from Seattle. Like many Native American tribes, there is a legend here of creatures known as stick Indians, or Tsiatkos.
As we both saw it, we turned and looked at each other and never mentioned it to anybody, but we knew what we saw that day.
These hairy, giant creatures are believed to inhabit the darkest reaches of the Olympic rainforest.
And if we were to wander off into the woods outside the perimeter of the village, we would get caught up by one of these creatures.
Local Native American legends tell of people who followed the whistling of the Tsiatko, only to be helplessly lost in the woods. It was then that the creatures would throw sticks and small objects at them, leading to the name Stick Indians. So these stories were just childhood stories until you actually saw one of these creatures.
Yeah, most of the stories, I believe, were stories that were made up to keep us within the village until we saw the Tsiatko when I was about 16 or 17. So now I have changed my story about that, or my feelings about that.
Recently, Dale Potter was bugling for elk with his grandfather when he began to hear strange noises coming from the woods. What happened next will never be forgotten.
Well, me and my grandfather were out bugling elk to try and figure out where they all were, because hunting season was a couple days away. We were scouting them all out for the family. So after bugled elk and a couple of them called back, we decided to walk down the logging road where the truck was parked down by the pavement. And my grandfather had his hearing aids out, so he wasn't picking up any of the fine sounds. And I kept hearing something walking in the woods right beside us. And I kept telling him we'd stop, it would stop. And right across the paved road, right beside us on the cut bank, about 13-foot, 14-foot trees just started to shake. I mean, it was quite violently. I'd say the tops of the trees were probably shaking each one of them back and forth 8 feet. And an awful sound, something between a cougar screaming and a bear growling. My grandfather, who's been trapping and running dogs for 40 years in that valley, ran around his pickup, got in, and started the truck and drove away and left me standing there. He was out. I felt like you were in somebody else's domain, and you were calling in their food, and you were stuck in the middle.
Oh, stop, let me in! Let me in! Lumpy Papa, let me in! Stop, Papa, stop, let me in! Let me in! Stop, Papa, stop!
I would bet everything I have that these animals are real.
Roger Blaine, former Washington State Department of Natural Resources officer and witness, never expected to see the kind of wildlife he saw one day in 2001.
Having worked in the forest as a National Park Ranger for 26 years, I couldn't explain this situation. I heard on the scanner that the Moclips Road across the Quinault Indian Reservation was opening up for the first time. It had been closed for a couple of years due to a washed-out bridge. I saw a large man, a very large man, step out of the woods onto the road shoulder. So I thought nothing of it. I just thought it was a logger going back to his pickup truck after a day's work in the forest. So I thought it was just a a logger covered with grease, which is nothing unusual. There was a highlight of tan around the edges of the creature, or the man. He seemed to be wanting to get across the road quickly, even though I wasn't particularly close. About halfway across, he glanced in my direction and then turned back to a steep bank on the other side, where he grabbed a hold of a small tree and sort of jumped and hoisted himself up onto a high bank. I didn't think much of it until I got to that point, and I realized how high the bank was. And it did appear that this man, or this creature, had stepped across a 20-foot wide road in 3 to 4 steps. So, wanting to see how big he actually was, I got out and I walked into this small clear cut with unlogged forest behind it. And I walked out into it looking for him, figuring that for some reason he was trying to hide from me, and I couldn't find him in there. And when I concluded that he wasn't there, that's when I started to feel like something was amiss. There were no vehicles. There was no signs of vehicles having been there. A feeling came over me that I can only describe as being sort of a primal feeling. And then the hackles on the back of my neck started to stand up, and I got a shiver up my spine, and that's when I started to realize that I very possibly had not seen a man at all. Perhaps I saw something that I couldn't explain.
Eyewitness sightings are one thing, but what about hard physical evidence? Local Bigfoot Field Research Organization investigator John Pickering has a plaster cast that he wants the Encounters team to examine.
Neat cast. Oh, and there's the toenails.
Well, it sure looks like it. And then there's some dermal features right in here.
Yeah, and we can see this metatarsal breaks around in there.
Those toes really, flexed into that mud and really gripped into it, the way it curved up like that.
It really does. I can see that. Chilcutt's really going to want to see this.
Oh, I can't wait to hear what he has to say about it.
He's going to find things that we wouldn't notice.
But what about the person who cast these giant foot imprints? A deputy sheriff and tracking expert at the time of the find.
Well, I've been a tracker, like I said, since 1968. I worked reconnaissance and ground surveillance in the military with the 82nd Airborne.
Harry Ford knew just what he was looking at.
I mean, I definitely couldn't determine these were fake, and along with the others that I actually kept. And we got the hair out between these two, I believe it was. And I got a letter back basically saying they couldn't classify it.
So in other words, there's so much anatomical detail in this that it's not something, if somebody was going to fake just a,
Oh, no.
Have you seen fake tracks before?
I've seen fake tracks.
And they don't look
We've
like...
eliminated fake tracks. Yeah. They were too natural. They had the movement, they had the flexibility, they had the proper ridge pattern. Everything was indicative of an actual live thing out there. From that point on, they pretty much had to prove to me they didn't exist.
Tracking expert Clay Butler lives in the area and wants to see the Sheriff Harry Ford tracks for himself.
Most of my experience has been in tracking people.
He's the kind of expert that could resolve this mystery once and for all.
And went to work for the federal government here as a Bureau of Indian Affairs police officer. From there, I became a U.S. Ranger, a federal ranger, and then a special agent for the National Park Service. It's a distinctly different looking track. I've never seen one like this. It signifies to me that it's not a typical track that we've followed, plywood cutouts and that sort of thing. This obviously has a lot more dimension to it. The track's pretty impressive. As a tracker, to see one casting or one footprint tells a part of the story. It doesn't tell the whole story. A track like this, I'm impressed with it. All the tracking that I've done. I'd like to come onto something like this and get on behind it and track it.
I'd like to be right there with you.
It'd be good to have company. If it continues on up into the mountains where I'm not able to go, well, it's probably not somebody fooling around with their
That definitely is a good
plywood cutouts.
Very interesting.
Good, clear photographic evidence of these creatures would be ideal. We feel our best bet is to place our surveillance cameras in areas where there's a lot of game and therefore a lot of food sources for these creatures.
The Encounters team is interested in investigating a remote spot that is reported to have had recent sightings. For day and night surveillance, the team will use still and video infrared cameras mounted in strategic locations. These AquaView cameras are watertight, perfect for the moist environment of the Olympic rainforest.
I think this would be a good location for a camera right across here. We got this pretty main game trail that comes up through here. Set it across between these trees and catch anything that comes through here.
So are you going to set it down low, or are you going to set it up high and angle it low?
Okay, go ahead and let go for a second. It's kind of floppy.
Need a bigger stick to hold it in place?
Yeah, I think that'll work just fine.
All right, that's perfect.
Great.
The team will deploy a series of motion-activated camera traps.
This wouldn't be a bad place for another camera looking across this little stretch here of this trail.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, this looks good.
What bases is in here?
All right.
Make sure you don't get any moss in front of the lens.
Perfect.
Great. Let's go.
In addition to good camera trap locations, pheromone chips, made from human and gorilla bacterial secretions, will be used to lure the creatures near the traps. A micron thermal imaging camera will allow the team to peer into the dark forests. Any warm-bodied animals will appear red-hot on the monitor. And the six-wheeled Max ATV, known as the Beast, will allow team access to the most remote reaches of the forest, over land and water.
What we need to do now is unravel the cord for the camera.
With the camera set and the scent trail laid, the team returns in the dark to deploy the final attractant.
We're going into a place where there has been incidents in the past, including one this summer.
They will play recorded calls of what witnesses claim are vocalizations from similar creatures, with startling results.
I was the one who invented call blasting. I have gotten more recordings, callbacks than anybody else.
Who says that he gets responses all the time.
I know both guys. And if you want to find out if they are there, you get them to call back. People have seen them stepping off of roads when the headlights have been coming up on them, and other people have seen them just hanging out on the sides, looking out from behind trees as the cars pass by. If we didn't have a thermal camera, we wouldn't see them standing on the side at all if they did that.
The Encounters team has set up an elaborate series of camera traps deep in Washington's Olympic National Forest. Their goal, capture images of a large hairy creature locals call the Tsiatko giant.
Time is against us. The odds of capturing an image of this creature by sheer chance are astronomical.
Well, this is a really well-used game trail. So let's start looking for a really good place.
Wildlife biologist Mario Benassi has years of experience shooting film and video from natural photography blinds. He has picked this location tonight, hoping to catch a creature unaware.
So would we set it down here at the end of the trail, do you think, or on the side?
Yeah, that's a good idea.
At the end?
Just so that we have a long view. This is perfect because we've got a convergence of these two game trails, plus the creek opening.
A lot of observations people have of them following game trails or creek beds, so it's a good spot.
This duff is quite thick, so it'll hold the cloth.
It looks good. I'm gonna head on down the creek.
All right, we'll catch you later.
Okay.
To better our odds, we need to try to lure the creature in.
The team decides to split up. Robin, Matt, and John will drive nearby back roads with the Micron thermal imaging camera.
We've got night vision, we've got thermal.
In an attempt to capture any warm-bodied creatures on film.
You certainly know we'll get it if it's right off to the side.
While Autumn and team member Scott stay behind the gravel pit. sitting quietly in the dark.
That smell came back about 5 minutes ago. It's the same smell that we smelled last night. Kind of like a skunk, little bit of wet dog body odor.
Hoping to catch a glimpse of what caused the odor.
Did you hear that?
While the surveillance team encountered one very distant unknown.
That's incredible.
And many known animals with a thermal camera. Back at the gravel pit, Team 2 is having an encounter of their own.
What the hell was that?
Something big bumps their parked 4x4.
It's hard to describe the feelings of anticipation and fear that come over you when you're sitting in the dark, knowing that you've just done everything you can to call this creature in.
Chuck, you didn't... Go! Grab this!
Go!
Get it off the dash. Something just hit the back of that bumper.
Yeah, I thought it was you.
Sure, it could be a bear or a deer out there.
Oh, shit.
But what if it's not?
Go! Go!
I've examined the Hereford cast and have come to the following scientific conclusion.
The Encounters team has spent the past few days near Grays Harbor County, Washington, attempting to collect evidence that supports eyewitness reports of a huge, hairy, man-like creature local Indians call the Tsiatko giant. Autumn Williams and the Mysterious Encounters team set up hidden motion-activated cameras near recent sighting hotspots. These pictures all show identifiable animals. While the Encounters team had several mysterious encounters of their own, a large creature walking nearby followed by a strange sickly smell, no unknown animals were recorded on tape. But what about the crisp and detailed tracks found by Sheriff Harryford? The original casts have been submitted to latent fingerprint expert Jimmy Chilcutt of Conroe, Texas.
There are dermal ridges on this cast, and these ridges are that of a non-human primate. These ridges are consistent with 4 other Sasquatch casts that I've examined in the past and are determined to be authentic. These ridges are about twice the thickness of a human dermal ridge, and the ridges that run alongside of the foot are ridges found only in non-human primates. In my opinion, this is a genuine Sasquatch cast, or a very clever fake by a person knowledgeable in the latest Sasquatch dermal ridge discoveries.
Generations of Salish Coast Indians have reported these creatures, and all the eyewitnesses we spoke to believe wholeheartedly that they saw something unexplainable. It's these mysterious encounters that drive us to keep investigating. Perhaps the answer to this mystery lies just around the next corner and down the highway.
Grab this! Go!
If you're enjoying all this rare and unique content, please show your support by subscribing and leaving comments.